2022, Bioscience paper, first year GNM. February 2022. Part 1. State the most appropriate answers from the following and complete the sentences. CSF is principally secreted by choroid plexus. Pancreatic juice contains trypsin digestive enzyme. The optic nerve gives the sense of sight. Left lung has 2 compartments. Appendix is situated in the right iliac fossa, region of abdomen. Match the following. Hemoglobin, anemia, mitochondria, powerhouse, growth hormone, pituitary gland, vitamin D, ultraviolet rays, pleura, serous membrane. State true or false. Pulmonary artery carries oxygenated blood. False. Mandible is movable bone. True. Blood group AB is universal donor. False. Normal tidal volume during each cycle in breathing is 100 milliliters. False. Large intestine takes part in digestion of food. False. Short notes, any 3. Diagram of heart, describe heart. Structure and function of stomach. Menstrual cycle. Femur. Composition and functions of blood. Short notes. Diagram of heart, describe heart. Normally located in the middle and slightly to the left side of the thoracic cavity on the diaphragm between 3rd and 5th ribs. Weighs about 325 gm in males and about 275 gm in females. Heart has base, apex, anterior, posterior. It has 4 chambers. Right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. 3 layers, outer epicardium, middle myocardium, inner endocardium and a covering pericardium. Pericardium. The pericardial sac has 2 layers, a serous layer and a fibrous layer. It encloses the pericardial cavity which contains pericardial fluid. Epicardium. Outermost layer of the heart. Visceral layer of pericardium. Myocardium. Thicker middle layer of the heart composed of individual heart muscle cells called as cardiomyocytes. Joined together by intercalated discs encased by collagen and other substances forming the extracellular matrix. Endocardium. Its cells are embryologically and biologically similar to the endothelial cells that line blood vessels. Structure and function of stomach. The stomach is an expanded J-shaped organ in the upper left region of the abdominal cavity. It is continuous with the esophagus superiorly and empties into the duodenum of the small intestine inferiorly. It continues the mechanical and chemical digestion of the bolus. After the bolus has been completely processed in the stomach, the product is called chyme. Functions of stomach. Digestion. Produce acid. Reservoir for food. Slows food entering intestines. Help with vitamin absorption, vitamin B12. The stomach is lined by a simple columnar epithelium. This epithelium contains surface mucus cells which secrete mucin onto the epithelial lining. The muscularis. It is composed of 3 smooth muscle layers. Inner oblique layer, middle circular layer, and outer longitudinal layer. Structural anatomy. The cardia connects the esophagus to the upper stomach fundus which merges with the body corpus followed by the antrum of the stomach. The lower outlet of the stomach pylorus merges with the duodenum. The left-facing arch of the stomach is the greater curvature, whereas the right surface forms the lesser curvature. The superior rounded portion under the left side of the diaphragm is the stomach's fundus. Menstrual cycle. Definition. Rhythmical series of physiological changes that occur in fertile women under the control of the endocrine system necessary for reproduction. Average length. 28 days, but typically varies, with shorter and longer cycles. Menarche. A woman's first menstruation typically occurs around age 12. Occurrence depends on overall health and diet. Menopause. End of a woman's reproductive phase, commonly occurs between ages 45 and 55. Age of menopause is largely the result of genetic phase. Average start and end day assuming a 28-day cycle. Menstrual phase 1 to 4 days. Proliferative phase 5 to 13 days. Ovulation 13 to 16 days. Secretory phase 16 to 28 days. Menstrual phase. Menstruation, menstrual bleeding, menses, period, discharge of bloody fluid containing endometrial cells, glandular secretions and blood cells, lasts 3 to 5 days, result of the previous menstrual cycle, due to strong vasoconstriction and proteolytic activity, functional stratum of endometrial tissue D. IEs and is discharged during menstrual bleeding. Endometrium becomes very thin, but due to low estrogen levels, hypophysis secretes more FSH. FSH stimulates secretion of estrogen, and estrogen serves as proliferation signal to the endometrial basal layer. Follicular phase. Due to the rise of follicle-stimulating hormone FSH during the first days of the cycle, several ovarian follicles are stimulated. Follicles compete with each other for dominance. The follicle that reaches maturity is called a Graafian follicle. As they mature, the follicles secrete increasing amounts of estrogen, which thickens the new functional layer of endometrium in the uterus. Estrogen also stimulates crypts in the cervix to produce fertile cervical mucus. At the end of this phase, ovulation occurs. Ovulation. During the follicular phase, estrogen suppresses production of luteinizing hormone LH from the pituitary gland. When the ovum has nearly matured, levels of estrogen reach a threshold above which they stimulate production of LH. The release of LH matures the ovum and weakens the wall of the follicle in the ovary, causing the fully developed follicle to release its secondary oocyte. After being released from the ovary, the ovum is swept into the fallopian tube. Luteal phase. Corpus luteum. Solid body formed in an ovary after the ovum has been released into the fallopian tube. Produces significant amounts of progesterone, which plays a vital role in making the endometrium receptive to implantation of the blastocyst. High levels of estrogen and progesterone suppress production of FSH and LH that the corpus luteum needs to maintain itself. Falling levels of progesterone trigger menstruation and the beginning of the next cycle. Femur. The femur is the longest, heaviest and strongest bone of the body, present in the thigh. It's around 18 inches, about quarter of the height of the individual. At the upper end it articulates with the hip bone to create the hip joint. At the lower end it articulates with the patella and tibia. The femur conducts body weight from the hip bone to the tibia in standing position. Parts. The femur is composed of three parts. Upper end, shaft. Lower end. The upper end contains the head, the neck, the lesser and greater trochanter. The shaft of the femur is gradually convex anteriorly with maximum convexity in the middle third where the shaft is narrowest. The lower end of the femur is enlarged to create medial condyle. Lateral condyle. Intercondylar fossa. Both condyles project backwards and are divided by the intercondylar fossa. The most notable points on the condyles are named epicondyles. Head. It creates about 2/3 of a sphere and articulates with the acetabulum of the hip bone to create the hip joint. Neck. It is 5 cm long and attaches the head with all the shaft. Greater trochanter. It's a quadrilateral elevation, projecting upward from the lateral aspect of the junction of neck and shaft. Lesser trochanter. It is a conical projection rising from the posteromedial surface of the neck shaft angle. Trochanteric line. A ridge of bone that runs in an inferomedial direction on the anterior surface of the femur, connecting the two trochanters together. Trochanteric crest. This is a ridge of bone that connects the two trochanters together. Composition and functions of blood. Blood is a special type of fluid connective tissue derived from mesoderm. The branch of science concerned with the study of blood, blood-forming tissues, and the disorders associated with them is called hematology. Heme means blood and logos means study. Properties of blood. Color. Bright red in arteries and dark red in veins. Mass 8% of the body mass. pH slightly alkaline, pH equals 7.35-7.45. Taste salty, temperature 38 degrees Celsius 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Viscosity 3 to 4 times more viscous than water, volume 5 to 6 liter. Composition of blood. Plasma. Red blood cells. White blood cells. Platelets. Blood plasma 55%. Cellular elements 45%. RBCs erythrocytes. WBCs leukocytes. Platelets thrombocytes. Plasma is a pale yellow-colored liquid component of a blood that holds the cellular elements of blood in suspension. Constituents of plasma. Plasma water 91.5%. Proteins 7%. Albumins, globulins, fibrinogen. Other solutes 1.5%. Waste products urea, uric acid, ammonia, creatinine. Nutrients glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, gases O2, CO2, N2 electrolytic ions. Functions of RBCs: transport O2 from lungs to tissues, transport CO2 from tissues to lungs. Function of WBC: helps to fight infection. Function of platelets: blood clotting. Blood clotting is the process in which blood loses its fluidity and becomes a jelly-like mass few minutes after it is shed out. Thank you for watching. Answer the